Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies, a great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I'd actually completely forgotten this was a musical episode until the episode was getting to that part. I was like, right, because I forgot it. I saw that something about it last week. But once again, I've talked about it. I get giddy about musicals, and I love that has become like more and more of a thing, popping into stuff like, The Magicians, Flash and Supergirl having a musical episode, Riverdale having a handful. So it's just neat for the Legacies to have one as well. But it's interesting because obviously we're picking up like where, Hope and Landon are and their complicated situation. Obviously it's like during dodgeball or whatever, and she lets Jed have it because she was pointing it towards and looking at Landon, but she stopped herself and throws it at Jed like full force. Then there were some girls in the library like, oh my god, Klaus Michelson, he was a monster, blah 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 blah. That sends Hope kind of spiraling. To be fair, I think it's just in the moment, because I think for her, it's a situation where, for one, saying goodbye to Raphael, because she's already had to say goodbye to so many people. Then also where her and Landon stands, it's just like every time like you get the feeling like everyone in your life is kind of walking away from you or leaving in some shape or form. And once again, she's been through that so much. Her dad, her mom, once again, her uncle. Granted, she's not in the best terms of Elijah, but still. I mean, granted, last season she reunited with Freya at the very least, so that's good. But she just feels like all the people in her life that she cares about most end up walking away from her in some shape or form. And I think for her dad, on top of people talking about her dad, because her dad will always go down in history as being like the quote-unquote monster that he was. But it's like no one got to see the side of Klaus, because Klaus was not Klaus around Hope. Even when she was a little girl, he always tried his best. And you remember that being a thing in season 4 of him trying to hide that part of himself away from her so she wouldn't see that side, But, hearing people talk about her dad like that, and she's also talking to that good fellow dude, and I'm like, who the hell is this dude? And then Landon walks in, and it's like, oh, this isn't, why should we need couples therapy? We're not actually a couple. He's like, I didn't walk away from you. She's like, you literally, your feet took you walking in the other direction. He's like, yeah, but I didn't walk away from this relationship. He's like, I just wanted, she's like, what? He's like, I don't know. And she's like, well, thanks for clearing that up. But also, it's like, she's like, I was hunting a monster. And like, hunting a monster, I was like, oh. I was like, because that's what I was wondering. I was like, who the hell is this dude, good fellow? I was like, I was like, we just start in the middle of this, and it's like, oh, that's the point. He's the monster, and he's controlling everybody. He's like, oh, Hope, how could you forget? You've known me forever. And it's like, let me tell you, Landon, about your future. And so that involves the whole musical and everything, because it's basically about the Salvatore school, which I loved it, dude. I'm skipping around a little bit. The musical was so good. Just like everyone, I love the whole bit of like literally everyone wanted to be Damon. I even love Wade being like, yeah, I think there's kind of a similarity between me and him. It's like, what? Wade? No, Wade, you're nothing like Damon. I mean, to a certain extent, you can make the argument he is kind of, because obviously Damon kind of had his soft spots as well. But still does, because he's still alive in this time frame, because obviously at the end of the show, eventually he dies and gets reunited with like, Stefan and everybody. But at the end of the day, it's like he's still alive, living a human life at this point in time in the timeline. You kind of do forget about that because like a lot of those characters, because he hasn't died, and eventually met up with him and Elena haven't died and met up with everyone again. But regardless, tangents and all that. But I love that, like, Caleb, he got to, like, do his thing. He's singing at the beginning, showing off. But then, like, everyone wants to be Damon. And I love it gets to Jen. He's like, let me guess, Steph, you want to be Damon. It's like, no, I want to be Steph. He's like, what? He's like, yeah, I think Stefan's actually, like, the glue that holds everyone together. He's like, I know. He's like, I'm so glad you think that. It's like, so do I get the part? It's like, yeah, literally, no one wanted to be Stefan. Everyone signed up for Damon. He's like, oh, cool. Jen's like, yeah, he nailed it. I was like, I love it. Then you have Lizzie being like, obviously, I'm going to play Caroline because, like, who would know my mom better than me? It's like, that's so befitting that you will play. And it's like, well, who's going to be Elena? And then it's like, it ends up being Josie, who's back from her, her break. And it's like, and I even love later on when she's giving Landon notes about, like, she doesn't understand Elena because it's just like Elena doesn't know what she wants and she comes off a little selfish. And, I thought it was kind of neat because obviously Landon, there are parallels between the story and, what Landon's going through. So I think he can kind of he understands where Elena is, like, wanting a normal life and just everything around you kind of being a little crazy. It's like, it's a story about not giving up on love. And she's like, but you don't believe that. You gave up on hope twice. And he just kind of looks at her and she's just kind of like, I was like, oh, ugh. Josie, that was harsh. But part of me was like, oh, maybe there's a little bit of that X aspect to it, where it's like, well, let's not forget they were together. That it's kind of like, oh, I mean, to be fair, it's like he didn't remember her, nobody did, but it's like, yeah, and now you're kind of doing it again. It was just kind of like, it was just very mean-spirited of her to kind of throw that out there. That kind of seemed like that might have been a Lizzie line, not a Josie line, but Josie, like I said, just kind of like backing away, like, yikes, I shouldn't have said that. I was like, oh, I felt so bad for Landon, and everyone's critiquing him, being like, yeah, I'm not going to say this line, even when the play's about to start, yeah, I'm not going to say that line. He's like, what? Yeah, make some changes. Jen's like, yeah, I got some, this line I didn't want to say, so I, reworked it. It's like, fine, put it on a stack. And he's like, yeah, good, so I loved it. And honestly, it was so dope going back through certain moments. You're like, oh my God, especially when Josie showed up with the black jacket on and everything. You're like, yo, Caleb and Jed doing that brother song with her, like, eventually. Oh, dude, it was just so damn good. It got me nostalgic and giddy. I mean, because what's so weird about it, like, if you compare this to Hamilton, yes, it's with, because obviously Hamilton is history and stuff like that, but it's so weird to think about it because this isn't like, in comparison to Hamilton and, the context of the story and just, what time period it takes place in, compared to the time frame of the Vampire Diaries and what time frame it takes place in the Legacies. Because they don't cover all the, all the, flashback past stuff. It's mainly just all the Mystic Fall present day stuff that I'm like, dude, it's so crazy to think, it's like they're doing a play about some stuff that happened, over 15 years ago, maybe? Because, obviously this was all before Hope was born, so she's, 15, 16, probably more like 17, but, probably nearly 2 decades ago, if you probably add up all the time frame that's passed, it's still such fresh history, because we're talking about people who are still alive. At this point in time, like I said, Damon and Elena are alive, Bonnie's alive, which I even loved. You had Landon stressing about it because he's like, oh my God, the Travelers, the Sirens. I was like, oh my God, you're bringing me back, dude, bringing up all this stuff. I love it. And he's also like, Bonnie disappearing for periods at a time in the story. Don't even get me started on her, the Sleeping Beauty curse. And I was like, oh my God, dude, that's so cool that this is it. I'm just so bummed. It's like, it doesn't touch on anything. It touches on at least one thing originals wise, but not, other than that, we don't really get to, to be fair, Hope didn't want to. To be fair, that's too much to fit in one play. Because obviously, even over the course of the play, they ended up skipping over a lot. They basically went from, season 1-ish to, the final season like that. There's a lot they ended up skipping over and going straight to in certain regards. So, obviously, you had Caroline being like, no, not Caroline, Jesus. Lizzie being reluctant to play her mom because at first she thought no, mom had had it all figured out. There was a clear point in mom's life where everything kind of was so clear to her. But for her, it's my brain she feels like she's always going to be self-sabotaging herself just because, Lizzie continues to think, something's wrong with her. And to me, I immediately was like, oh, that's so ironic that you think your mom had it all together. It's like, we as the audience know, just during her saying that, you're like, Caroline did not have it all together. Because I also wonder, there's probably a lot of stuff that Caroline kept hidden from them. Because in general, I guess I never really thought about it too much until that moment. I was like, you are a lot more like Carol. Because she was like Josie, you're a lot more like Carol. I feel like Josie probably takes a little bit more after Joe, if anything. She's a little bit more like Joe. And interestingly enough, I think, namesake and all that. But I feel like Lizzie's a lot like Caroline, when you break it down and stuff like that. And it's like, oh yeah. Because the thing I was about to bring up is I doubt Caroline told her all her dirty, her ups and downs. I'm sure she didn't tell the story of, like, obviously when her mom died, she didn't handle it well. Remember the whole turning her humanity off and the roller coaster of a situation that was. So I'm sure she, you know, so Lizzie has it in her mind like, oh, my mom is perfect. But it's not till later on when her mom sent her a letter to be like, you know, I was your age, I was a mess too. But the fact of the matter is, like, you think like you aren't changing. You are. Changing life isn't something that just like happens all at once. It's not like a big change. It's like there are little choices, little changes here and there that build up those little marks throughout your life. It's building up towards your life. So you are living your life. You are changing right now. And yeah, your brain might present you a situation where it brings you these challenges. But when you overcome it, like when you deal with it, I know that you'll be this wonderful person, through those ups and downs. Because it's like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Because Lizzie, if anything, thinks she's broken, but it's, Caroline telling her, you're not broken. You're basically like me. You're like any teenager at that time. Your brain might be a little bit different from other people, but it doesn't completely make you like broken in any shape or form. You don't think like that, So I just thought that was a beautiful thing. Also, Josie finding some elements to Elena, and so like she's like, oh, she at first kind of thought she had the character all figured out, but then kind of realizing like, oh, there's actually a lot of similarities between us. Landon had actually taken the letter that Klaus had written for Hope, and he wrote a kind of song around it, and obviously she didn't appreciate it because she was like, my family's off limits. And, it's like, I'm glad it was able to help you with it. Because obviously Landon wrote the whole story because it was helping him both deal. Because I thought what's interesting, because Landon said it's a story about learning how to say goodbye. I mean, when you actually break it down, like, how did a Vampire Diaries end? With goodbyes. How did the originals end? With goodbyes. I mean, and not just the endings, like, there were always constant goodbyes over the course of the show, and it's always about saying goodbye and finding some way to kind of keep moving on, in some shape or form. And obviously, he talks about later on, like, he didn't realize it at the time, but he needed this because he missed Raphael. Like, he struggling with saying goodbye to Raphael hit him a lot harder than he was really aware of. But when the time came, Goodfellow ended up pretending to be Klaus in that scene where he was talking to Hope, and you're just like, it takes you back. And you can tell it took Hope back in that moment too. And, it's like, you captured my dad so perfectly in that moment. And it's like, she's like, if my dad was here right now, would he be proud of it? And it's like, the person, would I have done enough to be the person my dad would want me to be? Would I be enough? And he's like, of course, your dad would be proud. And, I even said, I was like, even before Goodfellas, I was like, of course, your dad would be proud of the person you've become, He's been proud of you since day one, I mean, because if it wasn't for Hope, he would have never, honestly, yes, Klaus has always had his ups and downs, even in the later parts of the show, but I feel like he had a lot more ups than downs, especially as the series got closer to the end, like season 4 and 5, like he really tried his best to change, to be a better version of himself, to be a better person, and it's because of her. He wanted to do better for her because of her, and it's like, just, Goodfellow kind of reminding her that her dad would be so proud of the person that she became. It was just this beautiful moment, because it's like, you are like, she's a little too hard on herself because she feels like she's probably letting everyone down that she's ever kind of had to, say goodbye to. But it's also a message in this that, there are going to be, having to say goodbye to the people you care about, losing people. It is a hard thing, but you should never let that basically make you cut your heart off from the rest of the world. It's like going through that. Yes, it's painful, but it's a situation of like, is it better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all? It's essentially that, it's like, yes, love comes with pain, but when you lose people, that means that connection meant something. It was something important. Something you forged with someone, it was so important that it hurts. And that, that's why it's like, Kingdom Hearts. Yep, we're going to make a Kingdom Hearts reference. That's actually something, Sora kind of learns over the course of the games. I want to say it's in, it's like, hurt is actually a good thing, which it doesn't sound like. It's like, oh, that's it, but it means something mattered. you know? And if something didn't hurt, that means it didn't matter as much. But like the hurt means it mattered, you know, it was important, you know, no matter, even if it is something coming to an end. So I think that in itself, it's just kind of a beautiful message to kind of keep in, like, you know, it's a very like optimistic point of view. I'm sure you can look at it obviously from a very pessimistic point of view, but I think that there is a kind of a sweet beautifulness to it, that even with pain, it happens because, you know, you're feeling something because of something you lost, but it meant something to you, and despite the pain, it was worth it, you know? Those experiences, that feeling, like, you know, so Hope singing the final song. Granted, it kind of sucks because Goodfellow ended up breaking Josie's arm to kind of set that up, but still. I also love the whole MG situation, him being the one constantly figuring it out. It's like, who's the monster? You're the monster, and making those shock faces. And then, but he keeps coming back because he keeps forgetting. And Goodfellow's like, he's like, MG's like, I'm this close, and Goodfellow's like, yeah, you're this close. It's just, I love it. And you're drinking milkshakes. I love it. I love this show so damn much. But it's such. Honestly, it's a very heartwarming. There's some laughs. It's beautiful because, like I said, just because especially. I'm curious, like, how many people who do watch this show are just watching Legacies who've never watched Vampire Diaries or the originals. Because obviously this episode hits a little differently because I feel like I'd assume most people who watch the show are people who've watched the other shows as well. But I mean, you never know. Like, there's plenty of people who probably have never seen the original of a show but watched the spin-offs early. Because it's like, yeah, some people might be younger and they're like, yeah, I wasn't around when Vampire Diaries and the original was out, but I'm around with Legacy, so cool. Like, this is more my jam than maybe, because obviously I've brought it up before, tonally this is so tonally different. The show is so tonally different from the Vampire Diaries and the original. I said this back in season 1, and that's never a detriment. It's such an interesting thing because, like, tonally Vampire Diaries and originals are kind of like your very dark fantasy, and obviously this show kind of has its dark fantasy elements to it too, but it does have its lightheartedness in comparison, you know, which I think is kind of fascinating aspect about the show. But nevertheless, we saw, you know, a lot of like good things kind of working out at the end of it, you know, because Puck was like, because it turns out Goodfellow's like real name was like Puck, and I'm like, Puck as in like, well, because the Puck that's in my mind, interestingly enough, is Robin, which that was actually Goodfellow's real name too. That's what I thought was kind of interesting. But the name he was saying like Robin Goodfellow, because that was Puck. That's Robin's name in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. He's a hobgoblin. I don't know if he's a hobgoblin, is it? Because that's kind of like a trickster thing, isn't it? Which I'm confusing myself, but it's like, even before Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I would have never thought hobgoblin, but I felt like it was something else. Something along those veins. It might just be a goblin in general. I might have heard the name Puck associated with a goblin, but never like specifically a hobgoblin until Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Because that made me just think about it right now. Because like, right, that's because Robin's real name on Chilling Adventures of Sabrina was Puck, but his name was, I think, Robin Goodfellow. I didn't literally piece that together until I start saying that out loud right now. I was like, that's fascinating. Because I guess maybe that's typically how that mythology goes down. That's the name Puck goes by. I don't know. But I guess he's kind of a little bit of a, kind of a trickster. Doing a little bit of a low-key type of thing. But because obviously for MG, it's like, yeah, my thing is breaking people, but then piecing them back together. So it's like he kind of helped a lot of people. He helped Josie. He helped Lizzie. He helped Landon and Hope. They ended up, getting back together and everyone kind of cheering in the crowd and everything. I do appreciate us being able to have like the crowd reaction to moments like the laughs, the cheers, it's so good. But MG realizing like, whoa, so you aren't really a monster. And he was like, that whole storyline, he was like, it was all about redemption. I was like, dude, that's so beautiful, because much like, saying goodbyes and stuff, these stories, the Vampire Diaries, the originals, Legacies, have always been about redemption. There's been so many redemption arcs over the course of these series. So redemption is such an important thing, where it's kind of like the thing of, just because someone's kind of a monster doesn't mean, that there is hope for redemption for them. And, and it seems like that's what MG's part of playing this is, to, be there for Alyssa, like her redemption. which we also had Josie and Jade. I even love Jade being like, yeah, us being a thing shouldn't happen, right? Because, like, you know, I'm, like, way older than you, plus I kind of babysat you, so it would be kind of weird. But, yeah. But Josie's like, I would be, you know, remiss if I didn't kiss you for real. Last time I was, like, dark side Josie, so it doesn't really count. Well, they kiss, because Jade wants to leave because, like, obviously she has too many ties in this place to who she was beforehand. But obviously the same thing kind of applies for, it's like, yeah, like, because Josie feels like she's going through some changes, but everything around her is staying the same. So it's like, that means you might need to leave. Like, or at least not forever, but at least take probably maybe next time we come back, maybe Josie's going to spend some more time away. Who knows? It's definitely going to be interesting to see what kind of happens on that front. But, then you have, you know, Rick and the sheriff getting together, which I'm wondering, we see someone in like a sheriff kind of jacket at the beginning. I was wondering if that was supposed to be someone pretending to be like Caroline's. Well, because Caroline's mom didn't run things until later on. I don't think she was on. I think there was someone before. I don't like. You know, because it's so interesting because like I'm having all these conversations. The reason why this even hit me even more, because I've talked about this recently. My oldest niece is running through like the Vampire Diaries shows. Like she's currently, I think, on season 3 of like the originals right now. So it's just kind of I think that's what kind of, you know, this is all hitting me at like the right time because I'm already feeling nostalgic, like walking by the TV, seeing her watching stuff. I'm like, oh my god, this is my favorite part. You're seeing. Because I'm just going to talk about it just because it's there in the back of my mind. It was a moment between Klaus and Cammy, and I was like, Cammy, It just reminded me of that. I was like, dude, it takes me back. It feels like so long ago when actually, I mean, that still was like a handful of years ago. I mean, not just within the time frame of like within the TV universe, because obviously that was many years ago within the TV universe, but even just outside in the real world, it's like, yeah, that was a couple years ago. So, but I was like, man, Klaus and Cammy. I was like, dude, those two, just, it kind of makes you a little heartbroken. You're like, you kind of wish things had kind of like worked out for them, especially how Cammy's story. She makes a final appearance in the show, obviously, but it's like her final like episode, not just being in Klaus's head. That was just heartbreaking. It's just like her story playing out that way. It's just, once again, fits with the theme, goodbyes and all that. She was also a big part of like Klaus's redemption as well, you know. Regardless, I'm going on this huge tangent and stuff like that, but regardless. You know, Alaric kind of opening his heart up a little bit more, which was also kind of effed up when you actually think about it in the grand scheme of things. Because he's like, yeah, it's not an emergency while I'm here and stuff like that. Because it's like, right, because if it was life and death and emergency, the compulsion would kick in. It's like, it's still always going to be there a little bit. Granted, it's not like he can trigger that unless it's an emergency, but still, it's just kind of like, you're always going to have a little bit of a control switch over her brain, which is kind of effed up. To think about. Well, because especially for Alaric, for him, it's like having a stable love life isn't the easiest thing. The whole situation with Elena's mom, there's that. There's Joe, that didn't end well. Whole Caroline thing, because the whole her and Stefan thing, it's just like his love life hasn't even been the easiest and hasn't always worked out either. So hopefully things can, but it's like not being afraid to kind of take that risk because, it's like, hey, it's worth the risk every time. And in this particular case, he's saying, like, you're worth the risk too. So it's like, hey, like I said, love's all around. Very befitting considering we're in February. God, Valentine's Day is like literally like right around the corner. It's like a little over a week away. So regardless, I just thought it was interesting. But the whole Alyssa thing, because obviously, it's like, for every sacrifice we make, every life we take, we can summon a monster out of the pit. And it's like now we have like our two corners to this tribrid situation. Do you have a vampire? And obviously you have MG showing up to protect her because she came to him early in the episode like, just run. No one's going to believe you, even if you figure out who the monster was. Obviously, it played out the way. So part of me is like, you're still unclear where Alyssa stands, especially because the look on her face, like, it seems like she's not all for what the necromancer is about. But then, like, at the end, she's like, there's your vampire. So that's what kind of confuses me because I think she's very, very, I guess, very befitting and going with the scale of things. She's kind of like, a little in between when it comes to a lot of stuff as well. Because it's like, that look on her face made it seem like she was being genuine. Because now it brings the whole thing to make you wonder, because Puck was like, oh, I was supposed to seed some chaos and divert your attentions and stuff like that. But he kind of wanted to do his own thing. But part of me wonders, it's like, well, Alyssa had wondered about everything and was telling him just to run. But I guess she knew he wouldn't. So it's almost like makes you wonder, did Puck do what he needed to anyway to kind of push, do everything like this so that he could put MG in a position where it's like, oh, you know, leave him with that lesson, and that makes him not want to give up on Alyssa, and he comes there by himself. So, but like also said, like I said, there's that look on Alyssa's face. It doesn't seem like she's all for it, which is ironic considering she's the one that was all about the plan. But I guess it's like, you were dead set on your revenge, but it's like once you get the revenge started enacting, like you see other people dying because of it, like it starts weighing on you a little bit more. Maybe. Or, like I said, maybe she was play acting, but it's like, when she was just around him, why would she, not unless she knew that MG might show up, so maybe that was all an ad, but regardless, that's not good, MG potentially being the sacrifice in this situation, so I'm really interested to see where all of this is going to take us going forward into the next episode. Like I said, this was just a great episode. I was just grinning ear to ear. I was so giddy about this episode, so... But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.